Welcome to our deep dive into the science of the mind. We're exploring Owen Flanagan's book of the same name, and we're going to try and tackle a question that has puzzled people for centuries. What does it mean to have a mind?
Oh, it's a big question. And Flanagan tackles it from all angles: philosophy, psychology, neuroscience. He even touches on artificial intelligence.
Oh, wow.
It's a real mind-bending journey.
Well, I am ready to have my mind bent. So where does Flanagan begin? How do you even start to understand something as complex as the mind?
He starts with something we can all relate to, reflexes. You know, like when the doctor taps your knee and your leg jumps involuntarily.
Right.
It seems so simple, almost mechanical.
Right. It's like our bodies are just reacting automatically. But I guess that raises the question, are we really that different from machines?
Mm.
Are all our actions just pre-programmed responses to stimuli?
That's exactly the question Flanagan explores, and he introduces us to Descartes, who was wrestling with this back in the 17th century. Descartes rejected this idea that humans are just reflex machines. He argues that we do things for reasons, that we have intentions and desires that drive our actions.
So it's not just about a stimulus triggering a response.
Yeah.
It's about our minds making choices based on our goals and motivations. But wait, doesn't that make Descartes a dualist? Someone who believes the mind and body are completely separate things.
Yes. Descartes is famous for his mind-body dualism, and it's an idea that's been incredibly influential, but it also runs into some serious problems.
Yeah.
For one, if the mind is immaterial and the body is material, how do they interact?
Right.
How can a thought, something non-physical, cause a physical action?
That's a really good point. It seems like dualism creates more mysteries than it solves. And doesn't it also make it difficult to study the mind scientifically if it's something completely separate from the physical world?
Exactly. And that's a key challenge for any attempt to develop a science of the mind. So Flanagan introduces us to another big thinker, William James, who took a more pragmatic approach. Instead of seeing consciousness as this mysterious thing, James argued that it's a function, something that evolved because it was useful for survival.
So rather than asking, what is consciousness?
Hmm.
We should be asking, what does consciousness do?
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like my lungs are for breathing, my heart is for pumping blood, and my consciousness is for
Right.
helping me navigate the world and make decisions.
That's a great way to put it. James was all about understanding the practical purposes of our mental processes. He even had this interesting theory of truth where he said that beliefs are true if they help us survive and thrive. So a belief isn't just about being right or wrong, it's about how effectively it guides our actions in the world.
That's a pretty radical idea. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
if I believe that fire is hot and that belief keeps me from getting burned, then in a practical sense, it's a true belief
Yeah.
because it serves me well. But hold on, if our minds are just products of evolution focused on survival, does that mean we don't really have free will?
That's the question that James wrestled with, and it's one that Flanagan doesn't shy away from. James recognized the tension between a scientific view of the mind and our strong feeling that we're in control of our choices.
Yeah, it's definitely something to ponder. I mean, if everything we do is predetermined by our biology or our environment, then what's the point of making choices? But I guess if we're going to understand the mind, we have to be willing to consider all the possibilities, even the unsettling ones.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of unsettling possibilities, this is where things take a bit of a darker turn as Flanagan introduces us to Sigmund Freud and his exploration of the unconscious.
Oh yeah, Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, the guy who said we're all driven by hidden desires and repressed memories. Isn't he the one who came up with the idea of the Oedipus complex?
That's him. And while some of his ideas have been challenged over the years, Freud's impact on psychology is undeniable. He really shifted the focus away from conscious thought and onto the unconscious,
Right.
the part of the mind that operates beneath our awareness.
So all those things we think we know about ourselves, our motivations, our beliefs,
Right.
maybe that's just the tip of the iceberg. Maybe there's a whole hidden world of thoughts and desires lurking beneath the surface.
That's the Freudian perspective, and it can be pretty unsettling. Freud believed that our unconscious desires often slip out in unexpected ways.
Oh.
What he called parapraxes, those are things like slips of the tongue, forgetting names, even accidents.
Wait, so those times when I call my boss mom or accidentally spill coffee on a coworker,
Uh-huh.
those aren't just random mistakes.
Right.
They're actually clues to my hidden desires and anxieties.
Freud would say so. He believed these slips were a way for our unconscious to express itself, to bypass the censorship of our conscious mind. And of course, he also saw dreams as a royal road to the unconscious, full of symbolic language that could reveal our deepest desires and fears.
Okay, that's kind of creepy, but also fascinating. It's like,
Yeah.
if Freud is right, then introspection, looking inward to understand ourselves, might not be as reliable as we think. What if we can't even trust our own self-reports?
That's a key challenge that Freud poses to traditional psychology, and it raises questions about how we should study the mind if our conscious awareness is just a small part of the picture.
So if Freud emphasized the hidden depths of the mind, where do we go from there?
Well, Flanagan takes us in a completely different direction, introducing us to B.F. Skinner and the rise of behaviorism. Skinner was a radical behaviorist, and he rejected all this talk about mental states,
Really?
conscious or unconscious.
Wait, he thought we should just ignore what's going on inside people's heads?
Essentially, yes. Skinner argued that psychology should focus only on observable behavior. He thought trying to study the mind was like trying to study a black box. We can't see what's inside, so why bother?
But how can you explain complex human behavior without considering thoughts, beliefs, motivations? It seems like you'd be missing a huge part of the picture.
Skinner had an answer for that. He argued that all behavior, even complex behavior, is shaped by its consequences. He developed the concepts of operant conditioning and reinforcement to explain how we learn and change our behavior based on rewards and punishments. So if I do something that leads to a positive outcome, I'm more likely to do it again. If it leads to a negative outcome, I'm less likely to repeat it.
So it's like training a dog,
Uh-huh.
but for humans.
Hmm.
If you reward a dog for sitting, it's more likely to sit again. If you scold a dog for barking, it's less likely to bark.
Right.
Is that kind of what Skinner was saying?
That's a simplified way to put it, but you're getting the idea. Skinner believed that even our most complex behaviors could be explained by these principles of reinforcement.
But doesn't that kind of imply that we're all just puppets being controlled by our environment?
Yeah.
That we don't really have free will? I mean, I know I make choices based on what I think will lead to good outcomes, but I don't feel like I'm being manipulated.
That's the controversial part of Skinner's ideas. And it's something that sparked a lot of debate. He even had a vision of a utopian society that was engineered through behavioral principles, where people would be conditioned to behave in socially desirable ways. It's a pretty radical concept, and it definitely raises some ethical questions.
A society where everyone is perfectly well behaved. It sounds a little dystopian, to be honest,
Yeah.
but it's definitely making me think about how much control we really have over our own behavior and how much is shaped by forces outside of our awareness.
This is also fascinating. I'm starting to realize that the mind is way more complex than I ever imagined.
That's just the beginning of our journey. Flanagan has so much more to show us.
We'll lead the way. What's next on our exploration of the mind? Next, we'll move from behaviorism to the world of cognitive development. We'll delve into Jean Piaget's fascinating work on how children's minds change and grow over time.
Okay, so we've journeyed through the world of reflexes, wrestled with Descartes' dualism, explored the evolutionary perspective of William James, and even delved into the unconscious with Freud. And then we took a sharp turn with Skinner and his radical behaviorism. It's been quite a ride.
It's like we've been hiking through different landscapes of the mind, each one offering a unique perspective on what it means to be human.
Exactly. But if we're going to map this mental terrain, we need to understand how it develops,
Yeah.
right? I mean, how do we go from being helpless infants to complex thinking adults? That's where Jean Piaget comes in, right?
Yes, Piaget was fascinated by how children's minds grow and change over time. He wasn't just interested in what kids knew at different ages, but in the underlying structures of their thinking, the mental frameworks that allowed them to learn and make sense of the world.
So it's like a child might have some basic tools in their mental toolbox, but they need to learn how to use them effectively. And Piaget believed that this development happened in stages, right?
Exactly. Piaget argued that children progress through a series of distinct stages, each characterized by different ways of thinking and problem solving. He even had some really clever experiments to demonstrate these stages, like the famous conservation task.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that one. It's where you show a child 2 glasses with the same amount of liquid, then pour one into a taller, narrower glass. And younger kids think the taller glass has more, even though nothing was added or taken away. It's like they get tricked by appearances.
Exactly. And to Piaget, this showed that younger children hadn't yet developed the mental capacity to understand that quantity stays the same even if the appearance changes. Their thinking was still very concrete and tied to what they could directly observe.
So Piaget is saying that a child's mind isn't just a miniature version of an adult mind. It actually operates according to different rules, different ways of understanding the world. But how do kids move from one stage to the next? Is it just a matter of time, or is there something more going on?
Piaget believed it was an active process of learning and adaptation. He called it equilibration. Imagine a child encounters something new or confusing, something that doesn't fit into their existing understanding of the world. This creates a kind of mental imbalance, a state of disequilibrium.
So it's like a mental puzzle that doesn't quite fit together.
That's a great way to put it. And to resolve this disequilibrium, the child has to adapt their thinking. They can try to fit the new information into their existing mental structures. That's called assimilation. Or if the new information is too different, they might have to change their mental structures to accommodate it. That's called accommodation.
So it's this back and forth between trying to make sense of new experiences based on what we already know, and then being willing to change our thinking when we encounter something truly new or challenging. I can see how that would lead to increasingly complex ways of understanding the world as we grow up.
That's the essence of Piaget's theory. And it's had a huge influence on our understanding of cognitive development.
It makes me wonder, though, if this idea of stages applies to other aspects of development too, not just our understanding of the physical world. Like, what about our sense of right and wrong? How does that develop?
That's a great question, and it brings us to Lawrence Kohlberg, who applied Piaget's stage theory to moral development. He wanted to understand how people develop their moral compass, their sense of what's right and wrong.
Did he also do experiments with kids like Piaget?
He did, but instead of using tasks like the conservation task, he presented people with moral dilemmas, tricky situations where there wasn't an easy or obvious answer.
So it's not just about what people decide to do, but about how they reason about it, how they justify their choices.
Exactly. Kohlberg was interested in the underlying moral reasoning, the principles people use to make their judgments. And based on his research, he proposed 6 stages of moral development.
6 stages. Wow. What are some examples?
Well, the earliest stages are very focused on self-interest and avoiding punishment. A child might say something is wrong because they'll get in trouble for doing it. As they mature, they start to consider the perspectives of others and the importance of social rules and laws.
So their moral compass starts to expand beyond just their own needs and desires.
Right. And eventually, some people reach the highest stages, where their moral reasoning is based on universal ethical principles, abstract ideas like justice, fairness, and the dignity of all people.
That's inspiring. It sounds like a process of becoming more and more empathetic and principled. But I have to ask, does everyone reach the highest stage?
That's a question that Kohlberg himself debated. He acknowledged that not everyone reaches the highest stages, and even those who do might not always act consistently with those principles.
That makes sense. I mean, we've all seen people who can talk a good game about ethics, but then act in ways that are totally hypocritical.
Exactly. And Kohlberg recognized that moral development is a complex process, influenced by many factors, not just cognitive maturity. But his work definitely gives us a framework for understanding how our moral reasoning can become more sophisticated and nuanced over time.
It's also fascinating. I'm starting to see connections between all these different thinkers, how they're all trying to piece together the puzzle of the mind from different angles.
That's the beauty of exploring these ideas. It's like we're weaving together a tapestry of understanding, each thread representing a different perspective on what it means to be human.
So where do we go from here? What other threads are we going to add to this tapestry?
Well, we've talked a lot about philosophy and psychology, but now it's time to bring in the heavy hitters, neuroscience and cognitive science. We're going to delve into the cutting-edge research that's trying to understand the mind at the level of the brain.
Ooh, now we're getting into the really high-tech stuff. I'm ready to have my mind blown. What are some of the key things we'll be exploring?
We'll look at how neuroscientists are mapping the brain, identifying the different regions and networks that are involved in everything from perception to language to decision-making. We'll also explore how cognitive scientists are using experiments and computational models to understand how we process information, learn new things, and make sense of the world around us.
It sounds like we're finally going to get inside that black box that Skinner was so skeptical of. I can't wait to see what we discover.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive into the mind. From ancient philosophers to modern-day scientists, it's amazing to see how our understanding has evolved over time.
It really shows just how much curiosity humans have about the very thing that makes us human, our minds.
Absolutely. But it feels like we've finally arrived at the frontier of this exploration, the world of neuroscience and cognitive science. It's like we're finally getting a glimpse inside that mysterious black box that Skinner talked about. You're right. And one of the most powerful tools we have for peering inside that black box is neuroimaging.
Okay.
These are techniques like fMRI and EEG that allow us to actually see the brain in action, to observe the patterns of neural activity that underlie our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.
So we're not just speculating about what might be happening in the brain anymore. We can actually see it happening in real time.
That's the incredible thing. And these tools are helping us to understand not just the structure of the brain, the different parts and regions, but also the dynamic processes, the way different parts of the brain communicate and interact to create our mental experiences.
It's like watching a symphony orchestra play, seeing how all the different instruments work together to create a beautiful piece of music. But instead of instruments, we're talking about neurons, right? Those tiny cells that transmit information throughout the brain.
Exactly. And neuroimaging is helping us to understand how networks of neurons fire together in synchronized patterns, creating the electrical and chemical signals that give rise to our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions.
So it's not just about identifying the different parts of the brain. It's about understanding how they function as a complex, interconnected system.
You're getting it. And this is leading to some truly remarkable discoveries about how our brains learn, how we store memories, how we make decisions, and even how we experience consciousness itself.
This is all so mind-blowing. It feels like we're finally starting to unlock some of the deepest secrets of the human brain. But it's not just about understanding how the healthy brain works, right? Neuroscience is also helping us to understand mental illnesses and disorders in a whole new light.
Absolutely. Neuroimaging and other brain research techniques are giving us insights into the biological basis of conditions like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and Alzheimer's disease. And this is leading to the development of more effective treatments and therapies tailored to the specific neural pathways and processes that are disrupted in each condition.
So we're moving away from simply managing the symptoms to actually addressing the root causes of these disorders at the level of the brain.
That's the hope. And while there's still a long way to go, the progress that's being made is truly remarkable. We're beginning to see a future where mental illnesses are understood and treated not as mysterious afflictions of the mind, but as disruptions in the complex biological machinery of the brain.
It's like we're finally starting to break down the stigma surrounding mental illness and replace it with a scientific understanding of what's really going on. But what about the big question, the one that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries? Are we any closer to understanding consciousness?
Ah, yes, the ultimate mystery of the mind. While there's still no single universally accepted theory of consciousness, neuroscience is providing some tantalizing clues.
So we're moving beyond philosophical debates and into the realm of scientific inquiry.
Exactly. For example, researchers are exploring the role of specific brain regions, like the claustrum and the prefrontal cortex, in generating conscious experience. They're also investigating the neural networks and pathways that connect different areas of the brain, looking for the synchronized patterns of activity that might correlate with our subjective feeling of awareness.
So it's not about finding the consciousness center of the brain. It's more about understanding how the entire system works together to create this emergent phenomenon we call consciousness.
That seems to be the direction the research is pointing. And this understanding is being further enriched by advancements in AI.
AI keeps popping up in our conversation. I'm curious, how is AI helping us to understand the human mind?
Well, for one thing, AI is providing new tools for analyzing brain data. Machine learning algorithms are being used to sift through vast amounts of neuroimaging data, identifying subtle patterns and making predictions that would be impossible for humans to detect.
It's like having a super-powered research assistant, helping scientists make sense of the incredible complexity of the brain.
You got it. And AI is also helping us to refine our models of how the brain works. By building unofficial neural networks that can perform tasks like recognizing images or processing language, we're gaining insights into the computational principles that might underlie human cognition. It's like reverse engineering the brain, using AI to figure out how our own minds work.
That's fascinating. It's like by studying how artificial minds work, we're learning more about how our own minds work. It seems like the line between human intelligence and artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly blurred.
You're right to point that out. And it raises all sorts of profound questions about the nature of intelligence, consciousness, and what it means to be human in a world where AI is rapidly advancing.
It's almost like science fiction is becoming reality. But amidst all this technological advancement, I can't help but wonder, are we losing sight of the human element? I mean, what about the subjective experience, the meaning, the values, all the things that make us uniquely human? Are those things getting lost in the quest to understand the brain as a biological machine?
That's a crucial question. And I think Flanagan would agree that the science of the mind should never lose sight of the human experience. Understanding the brain is important, but it's not the whole story. We also need to understand how our brains interact with our environment, how our experiences shape our thoughts and feelings, and how our minds create meaning and purpose in our lives.
So it's not just about the data and the algorithms. It's about integrating our scientific knowledge with our understanding of art, literature, philosophy, all the things that explore the richness and complexity of human experience.
That's beautifully put. It's about seeing the big picture, the interconnectedness of everything, the mind, the body, the world, and beyond.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to ponder today. What a journey it's been. From simple reflexes to the mysteries of consciousness, we've explored the vast and complex landscape of the human mind.
We've touched on some truly mind-blowing ideas, but perhaps the most important takeaway is that this exploration is just the beginning. As science and technology continue to advance, our understanding of the mind will undoubtedly grow even more sophisticated and nuanced.
So this deep dive is just the first step on a lifelong journey of discovery.
Exactly. And I encourage all our listeners to join us on this incredible adventure. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep marveling at the wonders of the human mind.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the science of the mind. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.